The Galactic Concord met once every standard cycle aboard the great orbital ring of Xylos Prime, a shimmering band of alloy and light that circled a quiet blue gas giant in the heart of the known galaxy. Delegates from over 200 species gathered in the central amphitheater, their forms as varied as the stars they came from. Some scaled, some feathered, some wrapped in shimmering energy fields. They spoke in a dozen tongues, translated instantly by the chamber's harmonizers, and debated matters of trade, migration, and interstellar law. Most considered themselves wise, ancient, and above the petty squabbles of younger civilizations. Among them sat Cora Ellison, the sole human representative, small and unadorned in a plain gray uniform, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes steady. She had requested emergency speaking time, a rare privilege granted only when a matter threatened galactic stability. The reason was grim. 3 weeks earlier, a Krellian dreadnought, the pride of their fleet, had been destroyed near the edge of human-controlled space. No declaration of war, no warning, just a flash of light on long-range sensors and then silence. The Krellians, longtime allies of Earth, had lost over 5,000 souls. Initial reports pointed to human weapons signatures, but Cora knew better. She had seen the raw data from Mars Orbital Command. The attack bore the hallmarks of the Virex Dominion, a brutal faction that had skirmished with human outposts for years but never struck so boldly. Standing at the speaker's dais, Cora faced the council. Her voice was calm, but carried through the chamber without amplification, a trick she'd learned from old Earth diplomats. The Virex attacked a neutral vessel under false flag, she said. They used stolen human tech to make it look like we did it. But that's not why I'm here. She paused, letting the harmonizers catch up. I'm here to say this plainly. If any power in this galaxy harms human lives, civilians, soldiers, colonists, it will not end with a protest or a sanction. We will find you. We will follow you to the edge of known space, and we will not stop until justice is done. That is not a threat. It is a promise. A ripple moved through the chamber. Some delegates shifted in their seats. Others exchanged glances through flickering data lenses. Then came the laughter. It started with a low chuckle from the Zithan delegation, led by Speaker Vexer, a tall silver-skinned being with eyes like polished obsidian. He rose slowly, his ceremonial robes trailing behind him. Ambassador Ellison, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You speak like a cornered animal. Humans have only been spacefaring for 73 of your years. You still burn fossil fuels on half your colony worlds. You argue over borders like children fighting over toys. He turned to the assembly. A pup does not threaten the pack. And yet here we are listening to one bark. The laughter grew louder. A reptilian delegate from the Gorthan Coalition slapped his scaled thigh. A gelatinous envoy from the Mycelian Collective pulsed with amusement. Cora did not flinch. She simply watched them, her expression unreadable. She had expected this. Humanity was still seen as loud, emotional, reckless, a species that solved problems with fists and fire instead of patience and protocol. They did not understand that for humans, some lines could not be uncrossed, some wounds did not heal with time. After the session, Cora walked alone through the observation gallery, where the ring's transparent dome offered a view of the gas giant below, its swirling storms glowing faintly in the starlight. She thought of her brother, lost in the Jupiter ice riots 10 years ago. She thought of the Krellian children who would never see their parents again, and she thought of the Virex hiding behind lies, counting on the galaxy's dismissal of Earth's resolve. She tapped a message into her wristcom. Protocol Iron Vow remains active. Stand by for escalation. The reply came instantly. Understood. We're ready. Back in the council chamber, the debate continued. The Krellian ambassador demanded an investigation. The Virex envoy denied involvement with practiced calm. Most delegates voted to file the incident under unresolved anomalies and move on to trade tariffs. Cora's warning was entered into the official record, then archived in Subsector Delta 7, labeled Emotional Outburst, Low Credibility. No one noticed when her human aide quietly copied the full sensor logs onto a shielded data chip. No one cared when her shuttle departed Xylos Prime ahead of schedule. On the flight back to Sol Space, Cora stared out the viewport as stars stretched into lines. She did not feel anger. Anger burned fast and left ashes. What she felt was colder, deeper. It was the kind of certainty that settled in the bones. The galaxy thought humans were temporary, a flash of noise before fading into the background hum of older civilizations. They did not know that humans built monuments to their dead, They did not know that humans taught their children the names of enemies who wronged them centuries ago. They did not know that for humans, forever was not a figure of speech. Weeks passed. The Concorde moved on. The Virex grew bolder. They tested human patrols near the Orion Rim, probing for weakness. They spread rumors that Earth was fracturing from within, that its colonies were on the verge of rebellion. They believed their own lies. And then came Mars. It happened without warning. 3 Virex strike cruisers dropped out of warp above the red planet's northern hemisphere. They bypassed orbital defenses with stolen human codes and unleashed plasma warheads on the new Springfield settlement, a civilian terraforming hub with schools, hydroponic farms, and a medical center. 12,000 people died in under 8 minutes. Hundreds more were taken, dragged into stasis pods for genetic harvesting. The Virex broadcast a single message before vanishing: let the pups learn their place. On Earth, silence fell first. Then came the order. General Owen Briggs, head of strategic defense, activated Protocol Iron Vow with a single spoken word: hunt. Across hidden shipyards in the Kuiper Belt, in lunar bunkers and asteroid refuges, dormant systems came online. Engines hummed. Weapons charged. Crews strapped in. No fanfare, no speeches. Just motion. The galaxy had laughed. They thought humans would cry, beg, or retreat. They did not understand that humans did not mourn by standing still. They mourned by moving forward, fast, focused, and without forgiveness. The hunt had begun, and it would not end until every last one of them understood what Cora Ellison had tried to say on that quiet ring above Xylos Prime. The red dust of Mars still hung in the thin air weeks after the attack, drifting over the ruins of Springfield settlement like a slow, silent funeral shroud. Rescue teams moved through the wreckage in sealed suits, their boots crunching on shattered glass and twisted metal. They found toys in the rubble, half-chewed ration bars, a child's drawing pinned to a warped doorframe, stick figures holding hands beneath a sun that no longer shone there. The Virex had taken the living and left the dead as a message, but they had misunderstood who they were talking to. On Earth, in a buried command center beneath the rocky hills of Colorado, General Owen Briggs stood before a wall of live feeds. His face was lined, his uniform unadorned, his voice low but sharp as flint. Around him, officers moved with quiet urgency, eyes fixed on data streams flowing from deep space sensors, encrypted comms, and recovered black boxes. The order had been given. Protocol Iron Vow was no longer theory. It was motion. And motion meant consequences. Briggs did not believe in grand declarations or symbolic strikes. He believed in precision, persistence, and pressure that never let up. Within 72 hours of the Mars attack, 3 unmarked vessels slipped from hidden docks in the Kuiper Belt. They bore no flags, no registry codes, no names. They were ghosts built from scavenged parts, retrofitted with human ingenuity and cold purpose. One was piloted by Commander Eli Vance, a quiet man who had lost his entire unit to a Virex ambush 5 years earlier. Another carried Lieutenant Mara Finch, a navigation specialist who could plot a course through gravitational shear zones that would tear lesser ships apart. The third held Derek Cole, an intelligence analyst who spoke 6 alien dialects and could find patterns in chaos. Their first target was not a capital ship or a command hub. It was a refueling depot on the edge of Virex-controlled space, small and unguarded, used to support patrol routes near human colonies. The humans struck at shift change when fatigue made guards slow. Eli's ship disabled the comms array with an electromagnetic pulse. Mara guided drones through ventilation shafts to plant shaped charges on fuel lines. Derek jammed local sensors with a looped signal of routine maintenance chatter. 10 minutes later, the depot vanished in a silent fireball, visible only to distant telescopes. No survivors. No warning, just absence. The Virex High Command dismissed it as an accident. Faulty containment fields, they claimed. But then a supply convoy vanished near the Helios Rift. Its last transmission showed static. Then a single frame of a human-made breaching pod latched to the lead freighter's hull. Then nothing. A week later, a Virex listening post orbiting a dead moon went dark. When a recovery team arrived, they found the crew alive but unresponsive, seated in a circle on the command deck, staring at a blank screen. Carved into the metal floor were 2 words in human script. Remember Mars. Panic began to spread through Virex ranks. Patrols doubled. Convoys traveled in tighter formations. Commanders demanded answers, but their intelligence networks found nothing. The humans left no debris, no energy trails, no witnesses. They struck like shadows and vanished like smoke. Some Virex soldiers whispered that the humans were using forbidden tech, weapons that bent space or erased time. Others said they had made a pact with rogue AI. The truth was simpler. The humans were just very, very good at not being seen, until they wanted to be. Back on Earth, Cora Ellison watched the reports come in from a secure terminal in her apartment. She did not cheer. She did not smile. She simply nodded, as if confirming something she had always known. She sent a single message to Briggs. "They're starting to listen." He replied with one word: "Good." Meanwhile, the Galactic Concord remained oblivious. Trade summits continued. Cultural exchanges were scheduled. Speaker Vexer gave a speech praising the return to calm in the outer sectors. No one connected the dots. No one wanted to. The Virex filed formal complaints about unexplained incidents but offered no proof. The Krellians asked pointed questions, but were told to mind their own affairs. Only the Mycelian Collective, whose network spanned thousands of worlds through fungal spores and quantum entanglement, sensed a shift in the galactic current. They sent a quiet query to Earth's diplomatic channel. Cora answered with silence. The humans did not seek glory. They did not want medals or monuments. They wanted the Virex to feel what the people of Springfield had felt, helpless, hunted, alone. And they wanted every other power in the galaxy to understand that harming humans came with a price that could not be bargained away. The campaign was not about revenge. It was about memory, and humans remembered everything. One night, a Virex admiral named Korvesh retired to his private quarters aboard the fortress ship Iron Maw. He had overseen the Mars operation. He had laughed when the footage came in. Now he poured himself a glass of distilled methane and tried to sleep. But the lights flickered. The door hissed open. No alarm sounded. No guards rushed in. Standing in the doorway was a figure in a black tactical suit, face hidden behind a smooth visor. The admiral reached for his sidearm. The figure moved faster. When the Virex crew found him hours later, he was seated at his desk, hands folded, eyes wide open. On the screen before him played a loop of Springfield's final moments. The school bell ringing, children running, then fire. The human left no note. None was needed. News of the Admiral's death spread through Virex channels like a virus. Morale crumbled. Desertions tripled. Commanders began sleeping with weapons drawn. And still the attacks came. A data hub on Ceres Minor erased. A weapons cache on Gal 9 detonated from within. A scout vessel found adrift, its crew gone. Its log showing only one entry repeated for hours. They don't stop. The galaxy still laughed. But the laughter was quieter now. Nervous. Uncertain. They did not yet understand that the humans were not fighting a war. They were fulfilling a vow. And vows for humans were not broken. They were kept forever. The silence from human space grew heavier with each passing week. But it was not the silence of retreat. It was the silence of focus. Across the Orion Arm, Virex outposts flickered off the galactic grid like dying stars. Supply lines frayed. Communication relays went dark without explanation. What had begun as scattered incidents now formed a pattern so clear, even the most stubborn Concord observers could no longer ignore it. Something was hunting the Virex, and it moved with a patience that felt less like strategy and more like inevitability. Lieutenant Mara Finch floated in the dim cockpit of her ship, the Wayfarer, just outside the gravity well of a dead pulsar. Her fingers danced over the console, adjusting the ship's thermal signature to match the background radiation. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. But Mara was not indifferent. She thought of her cousin, a botanist stationed at Springfield who had sent her a seedling from Mars just days before the attack. It had arrived after. She kept it in a small hydroponic pod in her quarters, watered it every cycle, and never spoke of it to anyone. It was her anchor. Her reason. Commander Eli Vance operated deeper in Virex territory, threading his vessel through asteroid belts and sensor blind spots. He did not speak much, even over encrypted channels. His missions were clean, surgical: disable comms, breach hulls, extract data, leave no trace except fear. Once, after disabling a Virex patrol frigate, he lingered just long enough to broadcast a single audio file into their internal network. The sound of a human child laughing, recorded from an old Earth archive. Then he vanished. The frigate's crew reported hearing it for days afterward, even after their systems were scrubbed. Derek Cole worked from a hidden relay station near Titan, piecing together fragments of intercepted Virex chatter. He noticed a shift in tone, less arrogance, more dread. Officers referred to the attackers not as humans, but as the Echo, a name that carried weight in their language, implying something that returns no matter how far you run. Cole fed this intel to Earth Command, who used it to refine their next moves. The goal was no longer just to punish. It was to unravel, to make the Virex doubt their own safety, their own future, their own shadows. The Galactic Concord finally convened an emergency session, not out of concern for the Virex, but because neutral trade routes were being disrupted. Merchant vessels reported strange sensor ghosts, phantom signals that vanished when approached. Some claimed to see human ships where none should be. Speaker Vexer stood before the assembly, his usual confidence frayed at the edges. "This is chaos," he declared. Earth must be held accountable for destabilizing the sector. But when he called for Cora Ellison to respond, she simply rose, placed a data chip on the council podium, and walked out. The chip contained footage from Mars, raw and unedited, along with decrypted Virex orders authorizing the strike. The chamber fell silent. No one laughed this time. Back in human space, General Owen Briggs reviewed the latest mission logs. Losses were minimal. 2 drones, 1 stealth suit compromised, but the psychological toll on Virex forces was mounting. Deserters were turning themselves in at Krellian border posts, begging for asylum. One carried a journal filled with frantic sketches of faceless figures in black armor. Another whispered a single phrase over and over: "They don't stop." Briggs knew they were close. The Virex were fracturing from within, and that was more dangerous than any fleet. Then came the breakthrough. Derek Cole intercepted a high-priority transmission routed through a disguised cargo hauler. It detailed a secret summit between Virex warlords on the moon of Callus 7, where they planned to consolidate remaining forces and launch a desperate counterstrike against Earth's outer colonies. The date was 3 cycles away. The location was heavily shielded, buried under kilometers of rock. But Mara Finch had already mapped the moon's geothermal vents. Eli Vance had studied its patrol rotations. And Earth Command had a new prototype. Silent, fast, and armed with a single warhead designed to collapse tunnels without breaking the surface. The operation was called Deep Root. No grand fleet. No declaration. Just 3 ships, a dozen operatives, and one objective: end the summit before it began. They inserted at night cycle, using thermal masking to slip past orbital sentries. Mara guided them through a lava tube network that hadn't been charted by Virex engineers. Eli led the ground team, moving like smoke through ventilation shafts. Derek jammed all outgoing signals the moment they breached the command bunker. What happened inside was never fully recorded. Virex archives listed it as a geological collapse. But survivors who crawled out hours later spoke of shadows that moved faster than thought. Of voices that spoke in perfect Virex dialect but carried no emotion, only purpose. When the dust settled, 7 warlords were gone. Their command staff was gone. Only one message remained, etched into the central console in human script. "You started this. We finish it." The Virex Dominion did not collapse that day, but its spine was broken. Units stopped responding to central command. Fleets scattered. Some turned on each other, suspecting betrayal. The galaxy watched, uneasy as a once-feared power unraveled not from invasion, but from the weight of its own fear. And still the humans said nothing. They simply continued their work, quiet and relentless, like the tide wearing down stone. In the Concord halls, whispers grew louder. Some delegates began to wonder if they had misjudged humanity. Perhaps the humans were not pups. Perhaps they were something older, something that had learned the hard way that kindness without strength was meaningless. Cora Ellison did not attend the next session. She did not need to. Her message had been delivered, not with words, but with action. And in the cold expanse of space, action spoke louder than any speech ever could. The Virex Dominion was bleeding, and it knew it. What had once been a unified war machine, now splintered into desperate factions, each blaming the other for the silent war that had no front lines and no surrender. Their leaders, once bold in their contempt for younger species, now slept in rotating bunkers, changed routes hourly, and trusted no one, not even their own kin. The humans had not conquered them with fleets or fire. They had hollowed them out from the inside, using fear as their weapon and memory as their guide. And still the attacks came, quiet and precise, like a heartbeat that would not stop. In a final act of panic, the Virex High Council sent a formal plea to the Galactic Concord. They begged for sanctuary, for intervention, for anything that might shield them from the shadow that hunted them across the stars. They called humanity a rogue predator, a species that had abandoned reason for vengeance that threatened the very balance of galactic order. Their message was laced with desperation, but also with calculation. They hoped the Concord would see Earth as the true threat and move to contain it before it was too late. The emergency session was called within days. The amphitheater on Xylos Prime filled faster than ever before. Delegates arrived in armored transports, their usual calm replaced by tension. Rumors swirled. Some said human ships had been spotted near neutral worlds. Others claimed entire Virex colonies had vanished overnight. Speaker Vexer stood at the center of it all, his silver skin dull with fatigue. His voice strained as he addressed the assembly. "We stand at the edge of chaos," he said. "Earth has become a cancer. They do not negotiate. They do not warn. They simply appear, destroy, and disappear. If we do not act now, who will be next?" A murmur rose through the chamber. Some nodded. Others shifted uneasily. The Krellians remained silent, their faces unreadable. The Mycelian collective pulsed slowly, as if weighing unseen currents. Then the doors at the back of the chamber opened, and Cora Ellison walked in alone. She wore the same gray uniform as before, but there was something different in her step. Less plea, more presence. She did not rush. She did not speak until she reached the dais. Then she turned to face them all. "You want to talk about chaos?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear. "Let me show you what chaos looks like." She tapped a command into her wrist device. The central holo display flickered to life, not with battle footage or weapon schematics, but with home videos. A classroom on Mars, children laughing as they planted their first oxygen-producing shrubs. A family dinner in New Springfield. The father showing his daughter how to fold a paper star. Then sudden cuts, alarms blaring, sky turning red, buildings collapsing. Screams cut short. The footage was raw, unfiltered, taken from civilian wrist cams and security drones. It lasted less than 3 minutes. When it ended, the chamber was utterly still. 12,000 people, Cora said. Not soldiers. Not spies. Teachers, farmers, kids who had never even left Mars. The Virex didn't just attack a colony. They erased a future. She paused, letting the silence settle. And then they tried to blame us. They used our tech, our codes, our name to cover their crime. But that's not the worst part. She played another clip, this one from a recovered Virex data core. It showed genetic profiles, human DNA spliced with alien enzymes labeled Project Heirloom. Notes described plans to engineer human-compatible slave stock, using abducted colonists as templates. The room stirred. Even Vexer looked away. "You laughed when I warned you," Cora continued. "You called us pups because we feel too much, because we remember too well. But that's not weakness. It's our strength. We don't forget. We don't forgive. And we never ever let those who hurt us hide." She stepped back from the dais. "I'm not here to ask for your help. I'm here to tell you the truth. The Virex made their choice. We made ours. And if any of you think we'll stop just because you say so, you never understood us at all." Before the session could adjourn, news arrived. A Virex warlord named Torak the Iron-Handed, one of the last remaining high commanders, had fled his command post with a small escort. Intelligence suggested he was heading for the neutral zone near the Lyra beacon, hoping to vanish into the black markets of the Outer Rim. The Concord immediately dispatched enforcers to intercept him, citing jurisdiction over war criminals. But they were too slow. Commander Eli Vance had already been tracking Torak for days. His ship, cloaked and silent, waited in the shadow of a derelict freighter near the beacon. When Torak's vessel dropped out of warp for a routine jump recalibration, Eli struck. No warning. No demand for surrender. He disabled their engines with a micropulse, breached the hull with a single breaching pod, and boarded alone. Torak's guards fired, but their weapons found only empty corridors and flickering lights. Then Eli appeared behind him on the bridge, a compact pulse pistol leveled at the warlord's skull. "You took children," Eli said, his voice flat. "You thought no one would come," Torak snarled, reaching for a hidden blade. Eli fired once. The warlord fell. Eli placed a small data chip on his chest, a copy of the Springfield footage, and left. By the time Concord enforcers arrived, the ship was adrift. Its crew locked in their quarters, unharmed but shaken. Torak's body was gone, taken by Eli as proof that justice had been served. Not by courts, but by those who remembered. The incident sent shockwaves through the Concord. Some called it vigilantism. Others called it necessary. But for the first time, several neutral delegations spoke in favor of revising galactic protocols. No species should be allowed to commit atrocities and expect immunity, said the Krellian ambassador. And no species should be dismissed for standing by their dead. Even the Mycelian Collective issued a rare public statement. The echo is not chaos. It is consequence. Council Speaker Vexer tried to rally opposition, but his voice no longer carried the same weight. Too many had seen the footage. Too many had heard the whispers from the Virax front. The vote was held in secret, but the result was clear. The Concord would not move against Earth. Instead, a new clause was drafted quietly, behind closed doors. It would later be known as the Ellison Amendment. Any act of mass violence against human civilians will be treated as a galactic-level offense, with no statute of limitations and no safe harbor. Certainly, the hunt was not over. Pockets of Virax resistance remained. Scattered warlords still plotted in the dark. But the tide had turned. The galaxy was learning, and humanity, once seen as loud and temporary, was now understood as something far more enduring. A species that would walk through fire to protect its own, and would never stop walking until the last wrong was made right. The Virax Dominion did not fall with a great battle or a final explosion. It crumbled like old stone, grain by grain, until nothing remained but ruins and rumors. Its fleets scattered, some surrendering to Krellian peacekeepers, others vanishing into the uncharted voids between galaxies. Its warlords were either dead, captured, or hiding under false names in backwater ports where no one asked questions. The last stronghold, a fortress buried beneath the ice plains of Gore 12, surrendered without a shot when its commander found a single human-made drone sitting on his command chair. Playing a loop of Springfield's school bell, he walked out with his hands up. The hunt was over. On Earth there were no parades, no victory speeches. The people remembered too well what had been lost to celebrate what had been done. Memorial walls grew longer in every colony, each name etched by hand, each date a wound that would not close. But something else had changed too. In the markets of New Houston, in the shipyards of Europa, in the quiet farms of Ceres, humans stood a little taller, not from pride but from certainty. They knew now that their word meant something, not because they shouted it but because they kept it. Cora Ellison returned to Sol Space not as a diplomat seeking favor, but as a witness to a new truth. She declined all interviews, all honors. She visited Springfield's rebuilt memorial garden, where Mara Finch's Mars seedling now grew into a small tree, its red leaves fluttering in the artificial breeze. She placed a hand on the bark and said nothing. She did not need to. The galaxy had heard. The Galactic Concord, once dismissive, now treated human envoys with a quiet respect. Trade agreements were honored without delay. Disputes involving human colonies were reviewed with unusual care. Even Speaker Vexer, though never admitting fault, avoided mentioning Earth in public addresses. The Ellison Amendment became standard protocol, cited in dozens of minor conflicts as a warning to those who might test the limits of acceptable aggression. Older civilizations who had once seen humans as fleeting sparks in the long night of time began to study them with new interest. They noticed how humans built schools next to memorials, how they taught their young both to remember and to hope, how they fought not for conquest, but for the simple right to exist without fear. In the outer sectors, changes were even more visible. Pirate clans that once raided human freighters now gave them wide berth, whispering that the humans did not just defend, they remembered. Smugglers avoided routes near human space not out of fear of patrols, but of the silence that followed an attack. Even neutral powers adjusted their behavior. When a minor skirmish broke out near the Orion Rim between two non-aligned species, one side threatened to call in human observers. The other surrendered within hours. The name human had become a shield, not because of weapons, but because of what it represented. A promise kept, a line not crossed. General Owen Briggs retired quietly, handing command to a younger officer who had served under him during the early days of the hunt. He moved to a small cabin in the Pacific Northwest, where the trees were tall and the nights were dark. He never spoke of the war, but sometimes on clear evenings he would look up at the stars and nod, as if answering a question only he could hear. Lieutenant Mara Finch took a teaching post at the Lunar Academy, training the next generation of navigators. She still watered her tree every cycle. Commander Eli Vance disappeared from official records, but rumors said he still flew, not as a soldier, but as a guardian patrolling the edges, watching, waiting just in case the Virax What remained of them were given a choice: live in exile under strict oversight, or face the echo once more. Most chose exile. They built quiet settlements on barren worlds far from trade lanes and council eyes. They told their children stories not of glory, but of caution. Never provoke the humans, they would say. They do not rage. They do not boast. They simply come. And they do not stop. Years passed. New threats rose and fell. Alliances shifted. But one constant remained. Whenever a species considered harming human civilians, someone would speak the old warning, now a proverb across 100 worlds: beware the species that forgives but never forgets. It was not said with malice, but with respect. Even fear, when mixed with understanding, could become wisdom. On Mars, the new Springfield settlement thrived. Children played in domed parks, their laughter echoing through clean, bright halls. Schools taught not just science and history, but ethics, about responsibility, about memory, about the cost of violence. And every year, on the anniversary of the attack, the entire colony fell silent for exactly 8 minutes, the length of time it took for the Virex warheads to end 12,000 lives. In that silence, they remembered, and in remembering, they honored the promise that had been made in their name. The galaxy had laughed once. They thought humans were too soft, too emotional, too young to matter. They did not understand that for humans, love and loss were not weaknesses. They were the roots of strength. That to protect what you love, you must be willing to walk through darkness. And if someone hurts what you love, you must be willing to walk forever. The hunt was over, but the warning remained. And it would remain, as long as humans drew breath among the stars.